I've been making videos that help first-time home buyers on YouTube for over 5 years. When I first started, I still had a fresh face, no white hair anywhere, and I've been helping double that time home buyers here in the Phoenix, Arizona accomplish their home goals. So I've been doing this for a while, and the first thing I always get to ask is, what is the first thing I should consider before I go and buy a house? And time again, my answer will never change. You need to figure out first what you can afford before you even start the process. And the reason is because that's going to be the first primary question that just initiates everything. If you're not in a position to comfortably afford a house right now, then everything stops. Well, at least this is what smart people do, because nowadays houses are so expensive that people aren't doing the proper research. They're just going and talking with a real estate agent. They're going to talk with a lender and they're saying, yep, you qualify for a house. Congratulations. Next thing you know, 30 to 60 days later, they're in their dream house and well, that monthly payment just feels tight. Why is that? Well, because affording is not the same as qualifying. If you go talk to a salesperson, that's right, real estate agents and lenders are salespeople. Let's not get it twisted. If you go talk to a salesperson, they're not going to talk to you about what you can afford. They're going to talk to you about what you can qualify for. And once again, that does not equal what you can afford. So in today's video, I'm going to show you how to find out if you can afford a house. And the only thing I need from you today is a paper and pencil. That's right. We're not going to pull out the fancy calculators, although I do have some and I will show them to you. I want you to just follow along with the paper or pencil because I want you to understand the fundamentals of how this works. So let's start off by talking about the items I need you to gather before we begin this video. I need you to go get your gross monthly income. This is going to be essentially what you're making on paper. So you can look at your taxes, you can look at your offer letter. Odds are you probably don't know what your monthly is. You probably have an idea of annual. Next thing is I want you to actually pull up your actual net monthly income, what you actually bring home. And I don't want you to just get an idea of what you think you make home. I want you to actually physically look at your bank statements and calculate how much money you're bringing home after taxes, after expenses. Now, a caveat, a lot of people of us have our insurances paid with our employer. It's in my opinion that insurance is a cost, right? It is a bill that gets paid. However, for some of us, it gets paid through your employer. So I would say add that to your net monthly income, but it depends on your situation. This is your show, and however you want to fly, then that you fly the way you want to, baby. Next is get an idea of what your current savings number looks like. And I don't want to necessarily separate it in funds, like in different accounts. I just want you to have a mental idea of what those funds look like. For example, if you have $40,000 in savings, great. Well, how much of that is applied toward the house savings? How much is applied towards your emergency fund? Have that broken down. Just it makes things easier down the road. I want you to have an idea of the current price ranges of houses you love. That means pull out your whatever app or home search tool you're using and just kind of get a general idea of what price ranges are the houses you like. And I want you to be honest. Like a lot of people, when I ask them this, they go and they pick the cheapest house on their block. I want you to be completely transparent with yourself. What prices do you continue to find yourself looking at of houses that you really like? And last but not least, I'm going to need you to pull out your debts. What pops up if I pull your credit? I'm not talking about your debts to the mafia or to Tony Soprano or your dad or your uncle, your grandma, or hey, this my friend let me borrow $20 once. Nothing like that. Just what pops up on your credit if they were to pull your credit. I want you to get all your debts and I want you to add up all the minimum payments of them. So for example, if you have 3 credit cards, I don't care about the balances. I want to know when you look at your statement, what's the minimum payment? I want you to have all those in play. If you have a credit card and you just pay it off every month, then I don't need to see it. That's fine. This is someone with active debt that has an active minimum payment. Once you have all these things, let's move on to what you qualify for. This is going to be a rough idea of how banks find out how much you can qualify for. It's kind of broken because they're not using what you actually make. They're using what you're making on paper. Some might say, well, hey, I get some of my money or most of my money back on my tax return. Yeah, but most of us live with the money that we make monthly, right? We're not saying, well, we're going to live off the monthly and then down the road when I get my tax return, then I'm going to make up for it. No, like we use what we actually take home. So I want you to find out an idea of this number because this is a number that you're going to be given when you're talking to a lender and a realtor. So let's figure out some terms here, GMI and MD, your gross monthly income. and your monthly debts, which I told you to figure out earlier. So step one is you get your gross monthly income and you multiply it by 0.50. Now, the reason why I say 0.50 is because this is going to help us find out your debt to income ratio. This number here varies greatly. If you're getting an FHA loan, if you're getting a conventional VA, it can go as low as 0.45, 0.43. It can go as high as 0.56. So we're just getting an idea of what we're going to be told. So in this case, I'm just going to make a nice simple number of 0.50. But just know there's some wiggle room there. It can go lower, it can go higher. If you're really trying to squeeze this and you're like, well, I want to know exactly what I can qualify for, you're already going down the wrong path, my friend. If you're trying to squeeze every dollar to qualify, then you're buying well above your means. So I would caution that. And then step two is going to be get whatever number that was, which is in this case, and then we're going to subtract what our monthly debts are. Basically, we'll do an example right now so you can follow along. And this will give us basically the payment that you qualify for according to most banks. So let's just do a quick example here. Let's say myself and my wife want to buy a house. And let's say I'm making approximately $35,000 a year and she's making approximately $50,000 a year. That means our annual gross income is about $85,000. And if we get the calculator out, we can find out what our monthly is. That gives us about $7,083. So to make it easier, I'm just going to say, give or take, about $7,000. All right, now let's do an example here. So we're going to get our $7,000 and we're going to multiply it by 0.50. Now, some math heads out there might be like, hey, isn't that the same as dividing it by half? Yeah, I guess it is. So that's going to give us $3,500. The reason why I do 0.50 is because I like the visual of what the debt to income ratio is. So then once we get that number, as step two says, we're going to subtract it with our minimum debt. So in this case, we're going to assume she paid off her car because she's smart. And let's say I'm a big dum-dum and I have let's say a $400 car payment. And let's say combined, we have about 3 credit cards. Minimum payment for each one is about $60. So that's 400 plus 180. So that gives us about 580. So we subtract 580. That gives us 2920. So give or take, we're going to qualify up to $2,900 to $3,000. Does that make sense? So let's get that number and let's just store it in our brain or write it down in a separate piece of paper and let's move on. Next, let's figure out what we can afford. When we're figuring out what we can afford, I like to just figure out a range because I used to be one of those guys who are like, hey, you got to qualify up to this percent. And if you don't do that, you're full of poop. That was nice and all when things were somewhat affordable. But the reality is most people are not buying at 25% of your net income. It's just accurate. I still like to have it as the beginning of our range, but most people unfortunately are not able to. If you're in a position to do that, wonderful. You have made some great life decisions or you're very blessed. But a lot of the people I work with and deal with are just not in that position. So we have to be realistic here. Most people I help are buying between 30 to 35%. And some people squeeze that 40% number. I get a little uncomfortable going that high, but some people that do it are like, hey, well, my spouse is about to finish school and then that income isn't being considered yet. Or, hey, I'm actually going to be renting out my rooms to my siblings. So, I'm not considering that income in this. Okay, so there's always like other things that are happening or will happen soon, but just proceed with caution. So anyways, so what we do is we figure out what our true net income is. So this is what you're actually bringing home. This is how it should be, but banks are not going to do that. So let's say, earlier we said we were grossing about $7,000. Once you get that number, multiply by 0.25, by 0.30, by 0.35, and by 0.40, you write them down here. You get a good range of what's out there. So in this case, the previous example, I said that my wife and I make about $7,000. Let's say we're taxed about 15% of that. So we're bringing home approximately closer to $5,950. Now we get this number and we multiply 0.25, 0.30, 0.35, and 0.40. It's in 2380 around there. That gives me my range of where I need to be. So this is where you make a calculated decision of where you want to land. I would get this last section, and hopefully you do a better job of spacing your quadrants, not like me. I would get this last section and I would just draw a little skeleton. just to remember, the closer you get to that, the more deadly it is. So don't look at that and just like get goo-goo at. We usually want to be around here, right? We don't want to kind of get here unless there's like a specific circumstance. For a lot of us, this is where it gets depressing, because it's like, well, crap, man, like I can't really afford anything. Like that's substantially different. Well, that's the point, because if we follow where people want us to go, right? So here, 2920 is what we qualified for. Well, if we go back and we do the math, 2920 of 5950 is 49% of our income. So that's half of our income. And you're going to have to survive paying bills, paying groceries, paying everything else with only one paycheck. It gets real hairy at that point. And that's only because we freaking had all those debts. If we were in a position where we didn't have all those debts, so let's say, where were we at? We were at 7,000. If we didn't have these imaginary debts that we talked about, let's say we didn't have the car payment, we didn't have the credit card payments, then we would actually have qualified for $3,500. The bank would have qualified us up to 58% of our income, meaning more than half of our freaking income would go towards the mortgage payment. And that's would be a-okay. Real estate agents done, lenders done, but you're not done. You have to now live in this mess. And now listen, I'm going to be, bring out my little old head here. Listen, I'm not too old, but I'm in my 30s now. I feel like I'm at a point where I'm an unk, right? I can give you some advice. I've had some great months. I've had some bad months, but it's a part of being self-employed. But the months where they're not great months and there's not very much in savings and that mortgage comes up, it's emotionally painful and it's physically painful. Your blood pressure will go up and it literally eats into your soul. Never put yourself in a position where it could be bad, right? Like right now, maybe things are good and you're like, I'm making great money. It's not a big deal. We're just like one or two bad decisions that maybe aren't even caused by you that can just put you in financial ruin. For example, what if your manager does something stupid and you get fired from your job? That wasn't your fault, but someone else's decision is now potentially leading you to financial ruin. Right? So don't put yourself in that position. Once again, I'll repeat it, where you're one or two bad decisions from financial ruin. Getting yourself where that mortgage is close to half, 50%, is a bad decision, because things are great now, but things could definitely change. Let me just give you a visual here. I made it's the same exact formulas I just talked to, but I just made it into a spreadsheet. If I plug in those numbers, listen, you can get a visual of how scary it gets. Like you can't live off with half of your paycheck, right? You have to put yourself in a good position. You want to be between the ranges between green and yellow and do your best to not push this number. So now before we get depressed, let's take a step back here and figure out what we can actually buy with the numbers that we have here. So what you want to do is you want to pull out a mortgage calculator. I don't care if you use Zillow one or if you use a spreadsheet that someone made. There's a lot of great ones out there. I'm personally using the one I make because I'm obviously biased. And what you want to do is you want to just start playing around with it. So let's say we're at $400,000. Okay, we're going to go with the standard 3.5% down. Right now, the interest rate is like 6%. In this example, let's say I was looking at houses that are around 420 that I really liked. Well, that monthly payment is $29.66. That just doesn't work. I could have qualified for it. And if I would have gone talk to a realtor or lender, I would probably be house hunting right now, but it just doesn't quite work. Let's adjust the price. $350. $350 is $25.54. Okay. Now it's looking a little better, but still a little bit tight. So now you can start kind of formulating an idea, or you can even start having conversations with people, like I mentioned earlier, the salespeople, with the realtors, with lenders. But now it's a different conversation. Now it's a conversation where you're leading it. You're not being led. For example, you call, ring a ding ding. What's going on? I just want to have a conversation with you. We want our monthly payment to be between $1,800 to maybe low 2000s, $2,100, maybe $2,200. This is how much down payment I have. What are my options? What have you seen? At that point, they can tell you what's possible and not possible. For example, if I had someone call me, I'm here in Phoenix, Javi, I'm trying to get a house right now. I need to be up to maybe $2,000, $2,100. What are you thinking? I would say, well, honestly, resales probably won't work unless we go buy like a really affordable house in an area that maybe is not surrounded by new houses. But more realistically, I've been able to get clients houses around that monthly payment if we go get a new construction house where they're giving incentives right now, where they're giving you a 4% interest rate. And the last monthly payment I saw, and I'll pull up the settlement sheet, here you go, showing it to you. Clients paying actually $2,100 a month. They're starting off paying $1,800 because they're doing a 2-1 one buy down. So, but we're not worried about that. The payment that they end up with for the rest of their life is $2,100. So does that sound okay to you? So you start actually leading the conversation. You start learning more about it. And if you get somebody that just says, no, that doesn't work, find someone else. Like don't just settle for the first person and like get different opinions. Try to find agents that work in that price range that you're working at, that are comfortable talking those conversations. And then you can start really getting a feel for what is possible for you. Maybe at this point you have that conversation, talking about Californians, we're like, hey, maybe that monthly payment just doesn't make sense. It is not possible where I live. Maybe we got to start looking at different markets, right? So you just start kind of putting the pieces together. And if you decide to be like, you know what, I'm not going to move anywhere, and I realize I can't afford anything, so we're just going to stay put. Well, now you know you need to wait for prices to drop, or you need to wait for interest rates to drop. That's quite simple. If there's no solution, like new builds that are offering incentives, or you're not comfortable going into areas where prices are cheaper, maybe because they're too far away, you're not comfortable with the area, then you have a clearer picture of what you need to do. And once you've started this journey, one thing I really want you to learn as well is specific ways to tackle this interest. Because if you go buy a house right now, let's say you're buying a $400,000 house with minimum down payment, you're going to end up paying $454,000 of interest over 30 years. What's crazy is after 10 years, you've almost paid half of your interest because they collect all the interest up front. So if you want to find out ways of how to tackle this so you don't end up becoming a sucker and just paying all the interest to the freaking bank, you can make some significant change and dents into it just by adding an additional $500 a month. If you want to know how that works, check out this video here. I'll help you break it down. I'll help you break down what adding another $500 a month on your principal does to your mortgage and how much money you save in interest. Take care, guys, and I'll see you soon.